So this is a class on sociology, and this week we're studying functionalism. And the particular audience I'm addressing here is students who are becoming ministers or looking to be ordained as ministers, and you may be wondering, how in the world does sociology help me in my ministry? Well, that's what this video is for. And there are a couple of ways this week that I can show you some really practical tips. First of all, this week we're studying functionalism, so remember that. Last week we studied social interactionism or symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interactionism looks at the individual as being the one who shapes society. Functionalism kind of takes the opposite approach, and it looks at the society, the institutions of the society that shape the individual, functions of sociology, functions of the society. What are some of the functions of society? We'll break it down. There are several. For example, there's politics, there's education, there's religion, there's family, and that's just some of the material functions of a society. There are also ideological functions and many other ways to look at this. So how does functionalism help you as a minister? Biggest way, I think, is to look at it from this standpoint. If you're going to be like one of the advisors that King David chose to be in his cabinet, can I say, one of the kinds of peoples that he asked to be part of that were people from the tribe of Issachar. That's been the founding verse for our study here. They knew the times, and they knew what Israel should do. So it's important for a minister today to know the times and what the church should do. So understanding these functions of the institutions and how they are changing in the West should be able to help you understand how your ministry should be applied to the community that you live in. For example, let's look at this. Let's look at the institution of the family. Now, there are many ways to study these institutions, and one of the ways to study these institutions is by looking at, start with the U.S. Census Bureau. And there are others, the Pew Research Center, the Gallup polls, the Barna polls. These are all ways that help you to analyze the society, and you can even focus it in more clearly on a local level to where you're working. Think about the family, for example. The current population survey, which is a survey from the United States Census Bureau, says that 59% of adults in the age group from 18 to 44 live as cohabiting couples rather than as married couples. Think about that. How does that affect your ministry? How does that, if you're a preacher, how does that affect your preaching schedule and some of the things you should preach on? But it affects a lot of other things too. It's certainly affecting the economy of our communities. It hurts the economy of our communities. And we have children who go hurting, children who go hungry. We have a lot of other problems that come from that. In the last few years, in Oklahoma, for example, when Governor Keating was the governor of Oklahoma, he established the Oklahoma Marriage Initiative, which was an attempt to really get people to learn the commitment that is involved in marriage rather than just shacking up or just living together. My wife and I worked with that initiative for a long time as volunteers. We conducted workshops and seminars in many of the counties in Oklahoma. And Governor Keating's primary interest was not the religious interest, it was the fact that the economy of Oklahoma was being drastically hurt by so many cohabiting couples. You can look into that further. You can delve into it and see about that. It's also true. If that's looking at the family as an institution, but take, for example, education as an institution. How has it changed? You'd have to be kind of blind to think that education has not changed over the last several years. It's changed big time in my lifetime, and as a professor on 3 different university campuses, I can tell you that at least at the state universities that I've taught at, the concept of challenging the student is no longer the primary goal. You don't want to challenge because you don't want to trigger a student. A challenge might cause some cognitive disruption or frustration, and that's the last thing you want to do at American universities today. Hopefully, we're maybe seeing a little bit of that change. I don't know, but one thing that we do know for an absolute fact is that there is not much political diversity among professors these days. Statistics show that. Again, look at the Pew Research Center. Look at the Barna polls. Look at the Gallup polls. The vast majority of professors at state-run universities today are on the left. Now, whether you're on the left or on the right, I don't care, but it does make a difference. You don't get the other viewpoint. Students are being trained today with a singular viewpoint in terms of politics. That has ramifications for the futures. How do we prepare the church for a future where the students have been prepared by universities who only know one political ideology? How do we do that? Somebody needs to give thought to that. I've studied John Stuart Mill quite a bit, and Mill wrote in his book on liberty, he wrote this: "It's not enough that a student should hear the opinions of the adversaries presented as they state them and accompanied by refutations by their own professors." In other words, let me kind of break that down. I know that seems a little complicated. What Mill is saying here is the student must be able to hear from the persons who actually believe in a position, and the student needs to know what that position is in its most plausible and persuasive form. That's challenging the students. Rather than hearing the right side of politics, meaning the right wing of politics, from a left-winged professor who may tell you what those are and then tell you his opinion of them, what John Stuart Mill is saying here is that the student needs to hear those from the right-winged professor. Take that on to the existence of God, or how the world came about, or the existence of the world. the whole question of evolution. I really don't care how you feel about these things. I just do hope that you feel like these arguments should be presented in a balanced way, and our students, who might be both right and left leaning, are challenged by them. Religion is another major institution in the West right now, and you can see that it seems like Christianity in America has either plateaued or maybe even declining. There are different statistics on this in many different ways, but at very least you can see how some of the major platforms among religious institutions have been falling apart. Look at the Methodist right now, dividing. That whole denomination seems to be crumbling. You can look at it from the standpoint of the Presbyterians a few years ago, and many of the major denominations experiencing these things. In any case, you're the minister of your congregation, or at least one of the ministers, and it's your job to kind of understand the times and what your church needs to do. It's just not good enough to prepare the church for a world that used to be.